The chair of this session will be a bit late, but we'll start and he will come and join. Since the chair is not here at this moment, so let me just say a few words about this one. So this is a kind of work, presentation of the work SANEM has done, and also from Nepal IIDS, in collaboration with the International Food Policy Research Institute. And we've been working for almost a year now, focusing on the implications, the economy-wide implications of the NDC 3.0, the National Determined Commitment. We know that the kind of commitment the government of Bangladesh and Nepal, they have both made for this decarbonization. So in this case, so what we are going to do, we are actually, there will be three presentations. One by Dr. Borundev Pal. He is a senior researcher from International Food Policy Research Institute based in New Delhi. And we have actually made a very intensive collaboration with Borun and his team. And then there will be a presentation by me, but I will represent the Bangladesh team, which also consists of me, Shafat Tasnim, Faria Khan, and Afia Mubashirati Asha. So I'll make a presentation on behalf of Bangladesh team. And then there will be a presentation from Nepal, and where both of these researchers, Jackie Khan and Nanda Kumar, they are here, so they will make the presentation. So with this, I think since the chair is not here, would like to make any other. Why don't you start by inviting Dr. Borundev Pal, and also please, our friends from Nepal, you can come and join me at the dais. And Borun can, Dr. Borundev Pal can actually take us through the kind of context of the project and the methodology, because we applied the common methodology both for Bangladesh and Nepal. I think that will be very interesting. And just to give you kind of heads up that this session is going to be a bit technical, because we'll be presenting to you the kind of application of different models and how this model has been used both in the context of Bangladesh and Nepal to address the kind of issues, which we will be presenting today. So, Borun, please. I think we need to get out.
Are you ready? Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I understand it is a challenge to focus on technical presentation post-lunch, and that too in Dhaka after having rice, fish, and all typical Bengali food.
You also have chicken?
Yes. Unfortunately, I am also Bengali, so I understand your pain, right? So, but at the same time, looking at the audience, I really salute your determined concentration, unlike nationally determined contribution. Okay, so that we'll be talking about, but it is your also own determined contribution to be here to listen to us and to show your interest on this particular work. Before we proceed further, as Professor Salim mentioned, IFRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, and SANEM, we have been collaborating for long, more than even a decade. Even some evidence that I gathered from my institutions, from my senior, before I joined IFRI almost a decade back, SANEM-IFRI collaboration was there. And I'm fortunate to IFRI leadership as well as SANEM, especially to Professor Salim, that we could manage this collaboration taking up for the last couple of years. Our collaboration focus on two broad perspectives. One is strengthening capacity on economic analysis, economic modeling in this region, including Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, almost entire South Asia region, and we have been conducting the training on the model that we use, that's called general equilibrium model. Apart from that, last 1 year, IFRI collaborated with SANEM and our think tank partner from Nepal, the IIDS, to do some research activities, policy-oriented research activities for these countries. So the purpose of this particular session is to disseminate the result that we generated and to seek comments and suggestions from all of you. And especially for Bangladesh, I must say, in this particular center, this is third time we are interacting with the audience like you. So little background that why and how this collaboration started. To understand this project and to understand this background, let us go 3 years back in 2023. This is called UAE Declaration that happened during COP28. And that declaration built on 4 major pillars. One is scaling up adoption and build resilient in the economic system, and more specifically the food system. The focus of that declaration was that sustainable agriculture, resilient food system, and climate actions. And there is a 4 key pillars they identified. One already I said, that scaling up adaptation and resilient. Then second is food and nutrition security. Third is supporting workers in the agri-food system. And last but not the least, natural resource management and mitigation. So drawing evidence or realizing the need of these 4 key indicators, there is a pledge by UAE government and Gates Foundation. That pledge was to support and they built in cooperation within the countries. Okay? So Nepal and Bangladesh was the 2 of these countries that come under that pledged supporting activities. So there are total 5 border pillar of this project, or 5 border objectives. One was the national agri-food system diagnostic, followed by economic risk profiling, then policy and investment prioritization, and climate change vulnerability assessment. Those colored boxes, those were not the scope of the work that SANEM, IFRI, and IIDS did in this region. The work that we did here are the low carbon transition pathways that are typically for the country. Now, why we focus on this particular topic and this particular countries? This declaration in COP28, the leadership, global leadership realized that the developing countries like Bangladesh and Nepal, they are engaged in preparing their NDC 3.0 document for COP30 that that recently happened in Brazil during December 2025. So most of these NDC document, their key target is to set up a target for mitigation and focus on the adaptation measures as well. So adaptation and mitigation are 2 pillars, and there is a lot of targets they decide. The question comes, are these targets help or aligned with the national development goals? Mitigation is fine. We are trying to reduce the GHG emission because that is part of our collective responsibility for the global climate change. And adaptation definitely is essential for Bangladesh and Nepal because highly vulnerable countries. So the question comes is that when we are preparing this NDC 3.0, are these targets aligned with the development goals? That is where the motivation for this particular research came in. And we started developing a model that's called economy-wide model to understand the impact of this target if accomplished. Please remember, we are not modeling that whether Bangladesh can achieve this target or whether Nepal can achieve this target. So our objective is that there is a expert committee that developed the NDC 3.0. this set of targets being prepared and it's being approved by the government. Now, our job here is to add on to that, that if you accomplish, will it benefit to your economy growth, will create more jobs, or will reduce poverty. So if we take three broad pillars that most of this government will be of interest, then whether that fulfill there. So then it will help this government to negotiate with the developing partners and also the global communities to seek for investment and fund. At the same time, investors will find opportunities to invest to accomplish those targets if that has some social and economic benefit. So how we analyze that? So we use a dynamic model. It's basically long term because targets are set for 2035. So there is one is called business as usual scenario. That's basically the trend that we observed in the past. If we assume that trend follows, people may ask question that past couple of years we have been experiencing several crises, domestic as well as in the global markets, and very recently we are observing also West Asia crisis. So that means that will have definitely impact on the economic growth. Those are uncertainties. Even we don't know what is going to happen after 1 year and how long this crisis will go. So in this case, we are assuming it's kind of a situation where the country is operating on a normal mode for the next couple of years. So then this is your business as usual. You are just taking some experiences from the historical trend and you are taking it up until the next couple of years, until 2035. And then we are simulating with the targets. And if there is a deviation, positive deviation, then we say that we are gaining from the baseline. And if there is a negative deviation, then we can say that our economy will be worse off if we fulfill that target, or there is a trade-off. So this is the kind of an approach that we adopted for both the countries to analyze. Now, before I start my presentation, I said that after lunch, sitting on this technical session, you really need energy. And we have energy in our presentation. And we try to maintain the energy, but more we need energy from you. But at the same time, if you feel tired, we have transport also. And food already you had, that comes from agriculture sector. So there are three sectors we focus in this. And in the NDC document, if you follow, these are the big three ticket item or big pillars for the NDC document. And how we analyze that? We critically review. Okay, don't take this word critically in a sense that we have critically reviewed that whether it is happening. Critically reviewed in a sense that there are a lot of targets that the NDC document listed. Whether these targets can be modeled using empirical data. Whether these targets can be analyzed empirically. So we looked at that and then we model into our framework. For example, in the transport sector, in case of Nepal, they had a target of enhancing electric vehicle transport. Even in Bangladesh NDC also, there is a focus on electric vehicle buses, passenger car, and also the rapid transit system. And they set up a target, how many kilometers rapid transport system they want to improve, how infrastructure of transport sector you want to create. So all those information they are given. So we have taken that. And in case of energy sector, we have seen that promotion of renewable energy is common for both the countries. Nepal also focusing on renewable energy in terms of hydro, but Bangladesh is trying to focus more on the solar-based energy sector because of the comparative advantage of natural resources for both the countries. And in case of agriculture sector, that is the primary sector in both the countries. And climate smart agriculture is one of the priority under NDC 3. So we identified those technological interventions and set up the target. So now, first is that we review NDC 3.0 target for both the countries. Then we pull up things together and we develop different scenarios. There are several scenarios that presentations by Professor Salim and our colleagues from IIDS and Nandaji and Jackiji will tell in detail. So we take up those scenarios And then we fit that into our model. And in the model, we attach the micro-simulation model, like using household consumption survey data to analyze the poverty and employment information. The model framework looks like this. You have activities on the top. You have agriculture and non-agriculture that, in IFRI we call agri-food system, that basically entire agri-food value chain, primary sector plus agricultural processing and agri-food trade, everything, and other is a non-agri-food system. This is basically economy-wide sectors. It includes everything there. And then there is a transaction between the activities and the household. So household, they supply employment, and at the same time they also receive wage. Basically, in this model, we take into account how producers produce, at the same time how household earns and how household spend. So you have economic agents and their transactions into the economic model. So therefore, we can understand the economic growth and economic structural change situation better using this model. In this model, this model, the economy-wide model, is a data reconciliation procedure also. It involves a huge amount of data reconciliation. And there are three part of it. One is social accounting matrix, that is the mother of all the data that we use in the model. This social accounting matrix basically originates from the national account system. So every government, they publish the national account statistics. We compile their data into the matrix. That's called social accounting matrix. And then we link it with the micro-simulation activities, basically the household survey and labor force survey here. And then also we develop the simulation and we run it. So it's a bit technical data processing method in this. Just have a look at the structure of the SAM that we talk about. That we are saying social accounting matrix. Some of you who are attending our training and who are student of economics may be aware of this, but people who are not from economics background, maybe it is new for you. So it is a database that we create. It's a matrix from database, or you can say tabular database, where every column is the payment. For example, agricultural producer, farmer is paying for the agricultural worker, they are paying for irrigation, they are paying for machines. So that's basically payment we take into account for every column. At the same time, when we take into account household, they are paying for different commodities as their consumption. Food, non-food, they are also paying transfer, they are receiving transfer, so all this coming from there. And in the row, we consider receipts. So basically, when a farmer selling its paddy to millers, earning the payment. So that's a receipt. So this is the way this data is being presented. And this model that we talk about, the structure is, it takes into account the entire supply chain in the economy. So in the supply chain, there is a factory where producer is producing. And typically in economic theory, we have a production function. Production is a function of labor and capital. So if we look at this factory sector, we have accounted there. And then after you produce, then you compete with the global market. Whether you can export or if you have a deficit in supply, you want to import, so there is a composite supply. And then finally, that involves a lot of trade. Trade within the country, trade outside of the country. And finally, there are consumers who are consuming from it. So we have factory, warehouse, trade, and the supermarket. Supermarket, like the retail consumer, they are consuming. And there are commodities made in Bangladesh, made in Nepal, or made within the country, and also from the import. And finally, we also accounted the institutions. How institutions are earning, like they are earning from the labor capital, they are earning from transfers, and also remittances. And that is one of the two, for both these countries, are quite important. And they are spending on the consumption, taxes, and they also save. And then government here, they are earning revenue from the taxes, and also grants from other government. And they're spending on education, health, and defense, and also paying transfer payment to the household and enterprises, and also government saves. And finally, there is an investment that basically all savings from the institutions, the private and government institutions, that turning into an investment. And finally, we have a connection to the rest of the world. So this is the entire system of the economy. We model into this. And then we fit the NDC 3 target. We develop various scenarios to set up the first is the business as usual scenario, and then we see how much deviation we are originating. So I'll stop here, and now I'll request Professor Selim to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Borun. We have got our chair, Dr. Enamul Haq here, and we welcome him. Thank you, Enamul Bhai. So now, as Dr. Borun has kind of described the structure of the model and the context of all this exercise, so I'll take you through the kind of some of the results what we have got from the Bangladesh, project. So these are the kind of decarbonization scenarios of 2035 as per document of NDC 3. কেন ভাই কি একটু আসবে এই যে এসছে ওকে sure. So let's go straight to these three sectors. One is the energy sector, and then I'll talk about the transport sector, and then finally on the agricultural sector. So in the energy sector, we have considered these following scenarios. On the left-hand side, in the first column, you can see one is this renewable energy expansion, and you can see the description. I will not really go through in reading those descriptions, but it talks about some significant expansion of solar electricity by 2035, and there are some assumptions that you will have this, you will undertake different kinds of initiatives to expand this renewable energy. And probably you have heard day before yesterday, government is also targeting that by 2030 they want to produce 10,000 megawatt from renewable energy. So anyway, so these are probably in line with the kind of NDC 3.0. That is the first scenario. And the second scenario is on the reduce the transmission and distribution loss. We know that there is a transmission and distribution loss. Though there is no, and the target, NDC target talks about 8%, reduced to 8%. So there is no very accepted measurement of this loss, the magnitude of loss. But given the kind of some of the evidence what we have collected, that the current loss could be around 10%, so we have kind of modeled it that to reduce it from 10% to 8%. But under this scenario, it is just exclusively on reducing transmission and distribution loss. We have not considered any expansion of solar electricity. So solar electricity is considered in the first scenario. Third one is the industrial energy efficiency improvement. How to improve efficiency in the energy in the industrial sector. And NDC 3 talks about 10% energy efficiency improvement. And especially concrete brick will replace 40% of bricks demand. These are the kind of targets there. And then you can see we also made some associated assumptions, how to bring or enhance the energy efficiency in the industrial sector. The final scenario in the energy sector is about households' energy savings. And especially households will save 10% electricity used by adopting energy efficient appliances. So that's the kind of, we assume that the households actually make this expenditure and the kind of shifting of the, spending on these energy efficient appliances. So there are many other targets are also there in related to energy sector in NDC 3, but not all could be kind of quantified like this. So what we did, we tried to actually categorize and come up with what could be quantified, and we categorized under these four broad categories or four broad scenarios. And then there is a fifth scenario, we consider all these scenarios together. So this is the energy sector. Second one is the transport sector. Again, you can see there are few scenarios. One is to promote electric bus. For example, the target says 25 buses will be electric by 2035. And 53% of total road transport revenue comes from passenger transport. And we know that, there is some estimates that the 53% of total road transport revenue comes from passenger transport. And then we have made some of the assumptions like transport service with electric vehicle occupies less than 1% of total transport service. And transport sector needs to grow. And this is something, the kind of assumption we had to make to achieve that target, that to 14% annually to achieve the target of 25% electric bus transport by 2035. That's the first scenario. Then the second one is of the adoption of private electric car. And you can see that the target says 30% passenger car, private car will be electric. As of 2023, this is because this data is actually from 2023, social economic matrix, there is no private car in electric. So then we have made some of these assumptions and we try to adjust in our modeling and the simulation to achieve that 30% passenger car of electric by 2035. Then another scenario is the rapid transit to reduce traffic time is actually more related to the kind of efficiency bringing in that whole traffic system. And then one study shows, or several studies that we have come up with a kind of synthesis that 3.2 million work hours lost daily because of this inefficient traffic system in Bangladesh. As of 2023, average traffic speed is 7 kilometers per hour. But then, how we can actually achieve those kind of, efficiency. So we looked at the kind of, experiences in our neighboring countries and tried to come up with a target that increase average speed to 10 kilometers per hour, which is simply just 50% rise in that average traffic speed at this moment. So not a very, I would say, very optimistic, but something probably achievable. And then that's what we kind of try to build in this scenario. And then also the final scenario in this transport sector is about railway electrification and metro rail expansion. And that also you can see that targets talks about the number of kilometers will be brought under metro rail. And then, the expansion from the current operating is 22 kilometers, and then the target is 142 kilometers by 2035. So these are the kind of things we also captured in our simulation. And the final scenario is about these, all scenarios together. In the agricultural sector, the first scenario talks about adoption of solar irrigation pump. And then because of the time, I'm not really reading the description or assumption, but you can see that, understand that there is a massive expansion of solar irrigation pump which is being kind of considered. Another one is climate smart rice cultivation, and especially how to have alternative wet and dry method, to bring rice cultivation into under this alternative wet and dry method, and expansion of rice cultivation under this new method. And then another scenario is livestock feed and manure management. And then another one is expanding area under forest cover. And this is one that area under forest cover is also massive, our big target under NDC 3, and reforestation of around 100,000 hectares in coastal areas. So this is also a significant target in NDC 3, and we have also built it in our scenario. And then the final scenario is actually taking all these scenarios together. Now, okay, so these are the kind of scenarios I have talked about. Let's look at the results. So before going to the results, since Borun has said this is a dynamic model, so we had to actually build the business as usual, or baseline. We had to construct the baseline in the model. To construct the baseline, because if the baseline is very much offline, or it's not very realistic, then whatever results we produce can also need to be treated in that way. So what we did, and that can be debated, because when we started our work and the kind of assumption we made, and the model is very flexible, we can actually adjust accordingly. So it's not something very difficult. But what you found that the trend growth rate is around 6%, GDP growth rate, and we kind of consider that if this the trend growth rate continues, and then what our model produced is that it is 5.96. So actually, we tried to align that trend growth rate the way we build the baseline. And then, but despite that, we have built the baseline at the very macro GDP growth level, but also look at the sectoral one, where you can see that historical one from 2015 to 2023-24, this is a trend one, historical one, and the kind of projection in the model we are doing for the baseline, no shock, it's just the baseline, is that 2023 to 2035, is that you can see that there are some, some in the sectors they are close, in some sectors they are not. And in some cases, we actually applied our own judgment. For example, just take for example the manufacturing sector. we assume that there will be kind of lower growth than what was achieved between 2015 and 2024. So this is the kind of, because given the kind of strain on the economy, the kind of challenges Bangladesh will be facing, we are just simply talking about the baseline. So here we assume the kind of lower growth rate. So above all, with all these things, as I said, that the macro level, the GDP growth rate in the baseline, we try to make it as closer as possible. Now, the simulation results. So impact on GDP growth. So in the first set of graphs, it actually shows the energy sector reforms. Second one, the transport sector, and the third set, also the agriculture and allied one. So baseline in the energy, you can see that 6.1 is the baseline, the GDP growth. But if we apply all scenarios together in the energy sector, we see that the GDP growth, annual average GDP growth between 2025 and 2035 would be 6.94%. So there would be around 0.84 percentage point rise in annual average GDP growth rate if the energy sector targets are met in the Indice 3. Similarly, in the transport sector, you can see that it will be from 6.1 from baseline to 6.54. That means around 0.44 percentage point rise annual average GDP growth rate. And in agriculture, it will be around 0.31 percentage point annual average GDP growth rate would be added, if these the targets related to the agriculture in Indice 3 are met. So, and we also talked about the kind of per capita GDP in real term. So it's not in nominal term, it's in real term, is that if energy sector, we can see that using the energy sector, the impact on GDP, it would be by 2035, in real term, it would be $950 billion in real term. And also, if in energy sector, if you look at the employment, in all scenarios will create additional I'm just, trying to read the main message out of this slide, is that all scenarios will create additional 6.5 million jobs in 2035, due to the commitment, if the commitments under energy sectors are met. And also, if we look at the household income, interestingly, we have divided these households, bottom 30%, middle 50%, and rich 20%. We find that the bottom 30% households would experience larger rise in income than other categories of households. And additional people lifted out of poverty line, we find that additionally, an additional 1.7 million people will be lifted out of poverty if energy sector targets are achieved. Now, for the transport sector, again, we see that additional 2 million jobs will be created, and households and poverty, this is the kind of similar kind of stories appear that across these scenarios, that the poorer households, or the bottom 50% households, they will have larger rise in their income and expenditure, and poverty impacts would also be significant. 0.8 million people will be lifted out of poverty in 2035. And in agriculture, you can see that there will be 1.28 million additional job, and also similar stories with respect to the impact on household income and poverty. And we find that and then around 800,000 people will lift out from the poverty. So now, if we take all interventions, and this is also very interesting, that the impact on primary energy import, how it can actually save the primary energy import. We find that under only the energy scenario, energy sector scenario, there will, by 2035, the primary energy import, the baseline, we'll see that the baseline, it will be doubled anyway, but the primary energy import will be declined by around 15%, more than 15%, if the energy scenarios are being met. So, in summary, is that by 2035, if NDC 3 targets are achieved, it will boost Bangladesh GDP growth from around 6.1% annual average to 7.67% between 2026-2035. Additional 8.9 million jobs will be created and 3 million people will be lifted out of poverty. Renewable energy expansion is key to reduce import dependency. Upscaling solar irrigation is a logical step for sustainable agricultural growth. And however, the recent crisis in Middle East may disrupt the implementation of this achievement. So when we did this exercise, so we are not really kind of considering, or because this is almost at the end of this project, this Middle Eastern crisis, but our model can actually take into account, or we are now considering kind of extending the Middle Eastern crisis scenario into our model. So thank you very much. I'll stop here, and we'll listen to the Nepal presentation now. Thank you. Yes, please. So which one is that? This one, no? Yeah. Yes. Do you want like this, or you want to just hide presenter's view? This one. You would like this?
I will prefer the previous one.
Okay. Okay?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, distinguished delegate. I'm Nanda Kumar Maharjan, and with me is Jackie Khan. We are from IIDS, a think tank in Kathmandu, Nepal. So today we present Unlocking Nepal's NDC 3.0, Economic-wide Impacts of Energy, Agriculture, and Transport Transitions. As we have already discussed, NDC is a government commitment towards transitioning to net zero, and we have commitment of transitioning to net zero till 2045. So we have very ambitious target, I will say. And while transitioning to the net zero, what is the current scenario? What is the economy we have in Nepal? So currently, we use 64% of the traditional biomass, which is still very high. And in case of import, around 17% of our import bill is spent on petroleum import. So we have huge amount of import. And again, while talking to agriculture sector, we spent around 47 billion in 2022-23. So here in 22-23, we have fiscal year, so we start in mid of English year. So we spent 47 billion Nepali rupees for the import of rice. We are also importing energy. We are also importing huge amount of agriculture commodity. And if you compare the import of rice only, it comprises 16% of the total agriculture produce. So we are also, again, huge importer of rice from around the world. And when we talk about the climate vulnerability, where we position, we are responsible for 0.1%, around 0.1% of the global emission. But we are 10th most climately vulnerable or globally climately affected countries around the world. See, we contribute 0.1%, but we are at the top 10 of the most vulnerable country regarding the climate risk. So in this scenario, the core question could be, what are the economic implications of the climate action adopted by the government of Nepal to address the climate-related challenges? So this is the economic. We have import issue, we have production efficiencies, I will say, and we are also vulnerable to climate risk. So in this condition, what could be the adoption? What could be the economic implication while adopting NDC 3.0, which is proposed by government of Nepal? And we have targets. I will just quote the target, and we will deep dive in where we are regarding this target. And energy target, we have expansion of total electricity generation capacity to 28,500 megawatt. And solar power and other renewable energy, we targeted 15,000 megawatt till 2035. This is till 2035. And in case of increased EV, in case of share of EV number, we are targeting 20% for freight vehicle and 90% for passenger vehicle. We are targeting very ambitious in passenger vehicle. About 90% of the passenger vehicle will be electric in 2035. And when we talk about the agriculture, so increase the organic matter, which basically comprise the soil health, we committed, or we aimed to increase the soil organic matter by around 4%, and reducing the post-harvest loss by 15%, and improve cattle shed, which is one of the greenhouse gas emission in case of Nepal. We try to increase, or we aim to increase by 500,000. And in area of fruit plant by 10,000 hectare, and again 3,000 climate resistance farm and village. So we committed to increase 200 climate resilience farm along with 100 climate resilient village. This is climate smart agriculture. And solar power irrigation, again it comes under promotion of green energy. Solar irrigation, we aimed for 753,000 hectare, which is irrigated by solar power irrigation. So these are the targets we have committed in NDC 3.0 document. I will not go in detail in the methodology part, because we have the methodology part is described by Dr. Barun. Business as usual as the history trend continues. And for the ambition implement, we have 4 scenarios. One business as usual, one agriculture target, and within the energy target, we have divided into transportation and energy, electricity generation and electric vehicle transport. So we have 4 scenarios developed. One is agriculture, one is transport, one is energy, and one is business as usual. So regarding agriculture, I will deep dive in agriculture, and my colleague will brief on energy section. So in agriculture section, in agriculture part, we employ 60% of the population is engaged in agriculture, which is quite huge, and contribute around 24% of the total GDP. And since the involvement in agriculture is very high, but the efficiency, as we can see, is not very low, but it's low compared to our neighboring counterpart. If you see, the yield of paddy of Bangladesh is 4.89 metric ton per hectare, and if you compare with India, is 4.26, and in Nepal we have 3.79. So we are not comparing with China and other Vietnam counterparts, but we are comparing with our neighboring country, which is achievable. So again, we have targeted 4% of soil organic matter, but currently we have 1.92%. So we need very huge investment for increasing the soil health. And 69% of the crop area is irrigated. So this is not true yearly irrigated, but somewhat are irrigation. And we have 1,600 solar power irrigated pumps till 2024. And we have targeted 500,000 of improved cattle shed, but we are currently at 20,000. So there is a huge investment gap or huge implementation gap as compared to business as usual and NDC target. And if you compare the post-harvest loss, it varies from the perishable and non-perishable good. A perishable group up to 50% of the loss is absorbed in fruit during the post-harvest. So 50% of the loss of fruit is because of the post-harvest, and vegetables also 41% of the total portion is lost due to post-harvest. And again, the decreasing area of land area under fruit is one of the concern. So this is the reality, where we are and what we have targeted. There is a huge gap. So I would like to present the result on agriculture sector. So what if we achieve the NDC target 3.0? So it shows that the agriculture GDP will rise by 2.58% per year, mostly driven by crop and livestock, if we implement the agriculture target of NDC. And again, the total GDP will increase by 0.94% as compared to the base year, business as usual. And since we are targeting for soil health, increasing production, as the productivity increases, there will be, we consider that there is a decrease in food price and increasing in food processing industries. So food processing industry comprise 0.7 percent point growth in the increasing in the GDP, and the overall economy will be 12% larger in 2035 when NDC is implemented successfully. And we found that reducing the post-harvest loss is the main driver of the overall GDP, which comprise 49%, followed by cattle improved seed production, improved soil management, and irrigation and soil health. So post-harvest, reducing post-harvest loss is the main driver for increasing GDP, as we can see, which comprise 49%. And regarding the consumption and total welfare, what we found that the household real consumption increased by 10% in 2035 with NDC 3.0. And who benefits from the NDC? We can see the benefit is broader. The bottom income decile benefit 10%, 10.1%, and top income 10.4%. So benefit is relatively broader in this context, and around 317,000 people were lifted from poverty line, and we consider $2.15 dollar a day poverty baseline, and around 317,000 people were lifted out of poverty, and additional 110 jobs will be created while if we implement agriculture targets after NTC. And this again mainly we are the post-harvest losses. So I would like to request Zaki Khan to continue with transport sector.
Thank you, Nanda. So I will be talking about the transport sector, energy, and some action that can be taken. So as we know that this slides talk about the vehicle profile of 2022 and 23 years. So in 2022 to 23, 4.9 vehicles were on the road, out of which 2% were EV. And we can see that during the 2018 to 2022, 5 years, each year 285,000 new vehicles were added. However, the uptake of EVs were low as 4%. The NDC target for transport sector by 2035 is 20% for freight new vehicles and 90% for passenger vehicles. So this slide talks about the vehicle projections, what will happen. So by 2035, we will have around 8.6 million vehicles on the road. And in the business as usual scenario, there will be around 0.25 million vehicles. And however, in the NDC scenarios, you will see we will have around 1.52 million. That is around 17.6% of the total vehicles. So it's around almost 6 times. Now the important question is what will be the impact of EV expansion in Nepal economy. So first thing it's important to note is that NDC's focus on shifting to EVs rather than increasing number of vehicles. As our slide shows that transport GDP growth accelerates by 1.5% per year. And since transport is used by all sectors of the economy, overall GDP growth rate rises by 0.12% per year. Cumulatively, our national economy is larger by 1.4% by 2035. And also it creates around 10,000 new jobs, mainly lower educated workers in cities and towns. When NDC targets are met, household income rises by 1% in 2025. In terms of welfare, benefits of electrifications are quite equitable. As a result, the model shows the model shows that 9,200 people lifted out of poverty, primarily among the urban poor. Now let us focus to the energy sector. So as this slide shows that share of electricity GDP in total GDP in 2011-12 was around 1.1%, which is now if you'll see in 22-23, it is around 2.64%, almost 2.5 times more. And our hydropower accounts for 95% of our generation capacity, and electricity exports worth rupees 17 billion, or 11% of total exports, are a growing source of foreign exchange. So what about the electricity projection is that NDC target for energy sector is to go from currently 35,000 megawatt to 28,500 megawatts by 2035. So importantly what we are doing is 15,000 megawatts actually comes from the solar and other renewables. Under the BA scenarios, historical annual growth in generation continues, and under the NDC scenario, growth conditional on foreign financing. So what's the impact of switching to solar power and increases hydropower and total generations? So under the NDC 3 scenario, the annual GDP growth rate of the electric sector accelerates by 6.2 percentage points per year. Because electricity is used by all sectors, this has a strong multiplier effect. The overall national GDP growth rate increases by 0.1% points per year, and cumulatively economy is 2.2% larger in 2035. And around 82,200 new jobs were created, again mainly for less educated workers in urban areas. Household incomes rise by almost 2% higher in 2035. However, what we can see is the benefits are not uniform. The bottom income decile sees income growth of 0.94%, while the top decile sees 2.4%. This pattern reflects the capital-intensive nature of energy investment and the consumption patterns of higher income households. But gains for lower income households means that poverty still falls. The models projects 36,000 lifted out of poverty. So this is the crucial part of our analysis. So the combined interventions suggest significant potential for substantial structural intervention, but realizing these gains requires overcoming key constraints. So large financing requirement, for instance, 17.6 billion for solar expansion, and for cattle sheds only 104 billion will be required. And the other constraint is that institutional capacity, 52% of, as Nandaji also mentioned, that 52% of NARC vacancies are vacant. And there is a fiscal pressures are acute, particularly in transport, 51.6 billion annual revenue shortfall from lost fuel taxes. And importantly, there is a policy incoherence, like investing in both fossil fuel depots and EV charging stations simultaneously. So to overcome these barriers, our analysis points out 6 policy priorities. First, focus first on the post-harvest loss reduction and public transport EVs. Implement bonus malus system and address which will address the 15.6 billion gap. And another is to implement the green investment facility and expand the agriculture credit guarantees. The other is to address the NARC 52% of NARC vacancy and build resource capacity. Provide subsidy to smallholders and 2 to 3 wheelers EVs. The sixth point is to activate the international government councils on climate change body to break down the silos between the sectors. So, I will to conclude my presentations. NDC 3.0 is just it's not just a climate commitment; it is a credible economic development strategy. Benefits are substantial, as we have seen, and measurable. But I must echo this, realizing this depend upon the political will and capacity to address financing, institutional and fiscal challenges. Finally, a brief note on our caveats that we model achieving targets anticipated, but did not consider how easily they can be achieved. Further, we also only covered 3 sectors. Possibly some other taxes could have been included. We didn't include. Thank you. Thank you for the attention. Also, I want to acknowledge our IFRI partner, Dr. Barun and Manmeet Singh. They were very helpful with all the technical help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Even though I was late, I'm sorry for that, but I was listening Barun's presentation online, so I was on Zoom. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. We have listened to 2 country cases, NDCs and its impact on the economy. Let's hear from the audience. So we'll hear from the audience questions for any presenter, very burning question. Familiar face.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. My name is Navin Adhikari. So very glad to meet Inamda. Inamda taught me environmental economics during my Sandy days. Regarding this presentation, so I do have, 2 comments for both of the, the country cases. One, it could have been better if you could have just highlighted the closure rules. Okay, so that would be very easy for a student of CG like me to understand. And second one is, where you have actually given the shocks. So that was, it took a little bit, time. I took a little bit of time to understand that. And regarding now, I'll be, focusing on Nepal. Coming from Jakiji's presentation, so I think, whenever you are building the scenarios, so it would be very nice to disaggregate the data. So I could understand that, for example, the share of EVs and so on. So at aggregate is okay, but in terms of, CO2, contributions, or in terms of the impact on the economy, for example, 80% of total registered vehicles in Nepal is motorbike, right, 2-wheelers. So if you include them, and then, you say that the share of the total electric vehicle, the registered vehicle or imported vehicle, whatever, then that is 2% would be misleading, I think. Okay, so whenever you are building the scenario, then it would be better to exclude that section, so see that separately, and then, because Nepal has a very good and interesting story on the passenger, the 4-wheelers. Right, so on the public transportation also, there's a mid-tier called the, what we call the microbus. Okay, so it's a 14-seaters bus. These are all EVs. And Nepal has been the adoption rate, actually whatever, we are importing is almost 70% of the passenger car as well as, these minibuses are electric. So one thing is that. And second, I could not understand from Nandaji's presentation. So you told that 50% of almost, whatever gains that we are going to have in GDP is actually, from the loss. Okay, so I mean post-harvest loss. If we minimize that post-harvest losses, then we are going to gain that. But if we see the NDC, then it's only the fruits. Okay, so where NDC has been the ambitious, like there is a huge gap between what is the actual scenario and what are the targets. But fruit itself is not very much, maybe, for example, that much rice is just 20% of our total agriculture, 15% of total agriculture production. Then how come that, reduction on fruit post-harvest loss can contribute that much to the GDP? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's collect one more question. Yes.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mashukuzaman. I'm BIGT te kaaj korchi. So, thank you for the distinguished presenters for the presentation. Then, as a young researcher, to see the numbers is, I would say, very interesting. That okay, this much growth and happening. But if I'm thinking about the implementation aspect, like I had read about, let's just say, the NDC 2.0 a little bit. So what I could find that the amount that were implemented from the previous one wasn't probably that much as we were expecting. So in terms of the NDC 3.0, for example, if you're thinking about the energy sector, so for that aspect, to achieve that amount of renewable energy, the investment probably requires to be so high. So I would just like to put a question there, like how do you guys think that this is going to work on the long term to get the investment for the energy sector particularly? Thank you.
Okay, shall we come back?
Thank you for the question, Navin sir. I will try to answer agriculture part, how the post-harvest encourages 40% increase in the GDP. So regarding post-harvest, we consider fruits and vegetables. So fruits, we have 50% post-harvest loss, and again, vegetable, we have 40% of the post-harvest loss. So combining, the loss is very high. And if we compare the input or import of agriculture produce, vegetable is one of the highly imported, or vegetable contributed highly in agriculture GDP. So in that sense, the effect might be from the post-harvest loss. And again, the post-harvest loss not only minimizes the after production loss, but it also encourages processing, agri-processing. And for agri-processing and demand of the intermediate good, as a general equilibrium law follows. So in this way, it has a cascading effect, which contributed higher in contributing the increase in the GDP. So I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Navinji. So you talked about the EV, I think, no? So break down why we didn't do. I think one of the idea was that. So our in Nepal, you know that the government is also entirely focusing on. They want to do 100%. So that was also one thing, and the other thing was that even the NDC document, they also say they have targeted that 95% and 90%. So it actually came from that document also. So it's not our own, but because we followed that. So those are the two things.
Quickly, though, I think very interesting question, Naveen. Of course, we know the language of closures, but for most of the participants here probably don't know it much. But just to make it clear that in the CG model or the competitive general model, the closures means the kind of assumptions we are making, to run the simulation before running the simulation. So we had kind of very standards of assumptions, and Borun will probably elaborate on that. Also in the labor market, probably we considered unemployment for the unskilled labor, not for the skilled ones. So I'll let Borun to elaborate more on this, but I take your question on from the BIGD. I think it's a very interesting question. That given the fact that NDC 2.0, the achievements were not that big. But how come we can be ambitious that, NDC 3.0, we can achieve those? So Borun made the point very at the beginning that we are not really considering whether this can be achieved or not. If these are achieved, then what happens? Why did we do that? Because if you look at NDC 3.0, you will see all these commitments and also an associated amount of investment, what is required is a huge amount of billions of dollars needed. But often policymakers, they are not convinced that, often even, the community are not convinced that whether investing that amount of money or even, a fraction of it, what would be the actual impact of it? We know that these targets, when you look at these targets, they are very narrow and sector specific, but it has they have very important economy-wide impacts. So this model is very good in capturing that economy-wide impacts and telling you that if you can achieve those targets, so this will be the macro impact, sectoral impact, poverty impact, welfare impact, and employment impact. So this is a kind of, it's not only the achievement in terms of meeting the targets, but also in terms of achievement, in terms of achieving a higher economic growth or higher development. So I think that can convince the policymakers when we talk about the numbers. For example, our Bangladesh case shows that if all these three sectors targets are met, so on average, between 2026 and 2035, annual GDP growth rate will rise by 1.5 or 1.6 percentage point, and which is substantial. So, so this is the kind of, actually this carries a very strong message to the policymakers and associated stakeholders to pay more attention how to achieve those targets. I think this is the reason why did we do that. Purun.
No, thank you, and thank you, Naveenji, for raising those questions and concerns. I'm coming back to your question. Before that, also to add to what you asked about NDC 2.0 and then the concern about implementability. So let us think this way, like when you read the NDC 3.0 document for Bangladesh or Nepal, it's heavy on the mitigation and different targets for the adaptation. So when we conceptualize this project, so our idea, or even the idea from the donors community was also there, that NDCs should not look at a stand-alone policy document for the country. So it should align with their development goal. So therefore, when we are setting up some target, and definitely they are using some amount of analytical skill, analytical tool to set up that this much of the GHG emission we want to reduce. Okay, so this is also an ex-ante kind of assessment. So what we are trying to say here is that let us add on that whether these targets will generate growth, poverty, and reduce poverty and employment, so that we can have some platform to convert some of the policies so that your both domestic priorities like national priorities as well as international commitment can be achieved. So that way, this particular study you can see from the ex-ante perspective as a kind of a knowledge for us that, okay, this target. For example, when Professor Salim presented those results, you can see that all the targets are positive. But if you see in some cases, so for example, if I give you an example for forestry and agricultural solar pump set, these two targets, what we have taken in NDC 3.0, their implications are different. That does not mean that we should not prioritize solar pump set, because the target we have decided, 45,000 solar pump set, that will replace 200,000 diesel pump set. But in Bangladesh, we have 1.6 million diesel pump set. So that means you need a bigger jump to get that. But what our study is showing that even if you adopt this, you will have some positive economic gain. Why that will come? Because it will ensure water supply on time. It will reduce the risk of power disruption or interrupted power supply. It will reduce the cost of irrigation as compared to diesel and electric power. So farmer can get additional money to invest on, say, better technology or better seed. So that way, even some studies in a peer-reviewed journal, we have seen that the productivity also increase. So now your question on the transport sector for Nepal and also the post-harvest losses. So you see, in the transport sector, this is very tricky when we model electric vehicle. So electric vehicle, when a household is purchasing, is like something like a durable commodities. It's add less value to the economy because either you are hiring a driver and running, so you are paying some amount of salary to the driver. But if you're self-driving, it is like your home consumption, producing your food and you are consuming. But when you are riding electric vehicle, we model it in such a way that households' cost on electricity will increase partly, but cost on diesel will reduce. So we have derived assumptions from, say, our Indian case. Also, there is a lot of electric vehicles there in Nepal. So we use those experience for Bangladesh because we did not have substantial evidence for electric vehicle here. But when we say electric bus, this is actually transport services that will, add a value into the economy. So your two-wheeler case that comes under the electric vehicle, that is the household side. Okay, so what Jackie ji presented 2.some million, so that is with a new vehicle added during this period. Even if you look back 2019 before, there are no electric vehicle in Nepal. After that, and especially after 2021 onwards, the new vehicles started adding, and mostly the two-wheeler and the cars and other things. So those was the clear, kind of a argument for us. Post-harvest losses. Now, if you follow my presentation, in this model, we focus on the supply chain. So when we develop a scenario, say post-harvest loss, how this post-harvest loss will be minimized? One is that you need better storage, you need better processing sector like packaging and others. That way you can reduce because the target is massive. Currently you have 50% post-harvest loss, you want to reduce it to 15%. So unless until you have a massive focus on your processing sector, so the GDP gain additional you are getting, it's a combined effect of your processing sector as well as your fruits and vegetable. Final words for the process, fruits and vegetable is also that your 50,000 hectare land they are planning to convert under orchard. So that is also pushing the fact. Now coming back to your closure rule assumptions. So for the students, those are not familiar with CGE model, but familiar with economics. Closure rule is something like macroeconomic consistency. One closure is aggregate savings equals to aggregate investment. So in this case, sometimes we assume that government savings is fixed and we adjust tax rate to adjust the saving and investment. But when we run the dynamic model, what we do is that every year we accumulate new capital from the past year's capital formation. Okay, but in this particular case, we have a recursive dynamic model every year as if a new static model, but we are getting capital gain from the previous year's capital accumulation. So here we assume that both saving and investment will vary, like closure rule number 5, that is for your textbook only. So here savings rate will adjust, marginal savings rate will adjust to add total savings equals to total investment. In terms of employment, we assume that low-skilled workers are unemployed, but high-skilled workers, they are fully employed, because that is what we even see in terms of reality. So, but in our model, we consider wage rate in real wage rate in our model, unlike normalized wage rate. Because in some model, we don't use physical quantity of employment, we use one is the wage rate, and any changes in the value from one is basically our employment or unemployment scenario. But in this case, we have a physical quantity of labor, and then the equilibrium will decide how much labor you are demanding for different category, and then we determine. And at the same time, when any sectors earns profit, then they will pull up the resources. At the same time, we assume the labor is mobile. So if labor is getting more return from there, so there will be more employment. And the interesting fact, is that in Nepal, we see some of the rich households' income increasing, and in the Bangladesh, we see the poor households. Because the fact is that when we consider the Bangladesh case, the model says energy sector, solar energy, it's a new energy sector emerging. And who are the associated sectors will come in? Repair and installation service. It's unlike IT and financial service. Also some of the equipments and battery manufacturing. So if those sectors require the people who are employed on that sector, maybe the bottom or lower middle quintile households. So they are getting higher income. But hydroelectricity in Nepal is already established sector, and you are just giving a more boost into this. And it's basically the power supply sector where most of the maybe the urban households are engaged in, and their income is rising, or maybe the higher quintile people are engaged in. So it is depend on where people are employed and how they are earning. Okay, sorry for the short question, long answer.
Long answer. Thank you. More questions from the audience? No? Okay, that is me. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a very good true presentation. In fact, for the academics, it's very good. You see the impact of a model. And I think the result should be, the way I see the result is like, if all the pledges are fulfilled, what will happen? So you get from the model an idea, the potential benefits that you will get. But as we know, economics is more behavior also. So there is a lot of issues that come up in terms of implementing things. And I think that is where you should not use this model to think about it. But the model gives you an idea that is there any incentive for us to push for it. I think that is the message the model is giving, and I think that's how we should take it. I give you one idea, a few ideas for us to think about it. If the model assumes significantly solar benefits for Bangladesh, I'm looking at Bangladesh, I give you one of the information that is important. We have already in Bangladesh 1700 megawatt of renewable energy. Of that, about 1000 megawatt of renewable, 1100 megawatt of renewable energy in the grid line. The rest are private. Of the grid line renewable energy, wind is mostly very small amount they produce. And solar is about 20-30%. Very occasionally, very good sunny day gets to 50%. Which, on the other hand, if you have other sources of energy, whatever megawatt installed capacity, you get about 70-80%. So you see the difference. The system loss in the solar is very high. So if I'm thinking of using solar as a substitute for other energies, primary energy sources, that will probably still be far away. I think that should be understood by everyone, because I think we have an idea that solar is a good substitute. It's so fluctuating, it's not working in many cases. So 10,000 megawatt of capacity will probably give you about 2,000, effective supply. And imagine the investment required for this. So I think in a cost-benefit analysis, we should look into that as a target, rather than become a very lofty or very sexy strategy. Oh, this is a fantastic one. So I'm really big skeptical, despite the fact I'm for it, but I'm giving you ideas to understand that solar is worth in Bangladesh, but we have to understand where it is. And that should be the way to think about it. The second point, some of the gains they assumed, I'm looking at mostly Bangladesh one, the gains they assumed, for example, gains in agriculture. We have a significant potential in agriculture. But one of the gains, for example, this was a very good one, wet and dry irrigation technology. And wet and dry irrigation technology has been there for the last 10 years, but adoption rate is very low. So that's what I mentioned, that why it is not being adopted is a question that people should ask, and they should try to come up with solutions for it. Otherwise, it gives you an idea that this is a potential, but it may not be achieved, and that's what is important to understand. The other one that I was looking at Nepal, and this surprised me, that the investment in a beneficiary are all richer group compared to Bangladesh, where the beneficiaries are poorer group. I had a question. I was actually asking this when I saw that why there is a difference. And I'm not fully convinced it's all because of solar versus hydro. My feeling is that there are more to in the model, whether there is something inside the model that is doing it. I would like to think about it, because 50% of their additional power is coming from, 52% is coming from solar, if I understood that presentation. So about 52% of the new power is coming from solar, which is a large amount. So that's what I'm thinking, you should double check this. But I think overall, we had made NDC pledge in Bangladesh. We are not very good at implementing it. My understanding, the most beneficiary sector is transport. That's going to come in, particularly with the current, it would have come already, but you see what is the human behavior. The barrel price, oil price was 70. And it was 70, 75, that was the target of the oil companies, oil exporters. Because they know if it goes to 100, people will switch to solar. So you realize that in order for creating the incentive to switch to solar, the oil price should be around $100, around $100. But if it is not around $100, there will be no incentive for people to go to solar. So remember the assumption. This is also a very important assumption. The second and important one, this is one of my research that we did in 2022, is that if you want to push for NDC pledges to be implemented, what are the behavioral policy making that you would expect? And here there are two groups. One group is the bureaucrats who design the policy, and the second group is the industry who are going to be adopted. And what we see in our research, that the aspiration of these two groups are completely different. In other words, bureaucrats want big projects, and that is in Bangladesh as well as in Nepal. They want big projects to be implemented by the government. They said, if you want to implement NDC, what we want? Big solar project, 10,000 megawatt, because it's in their control. Whereas when I go to the stakeholder, means the industry, they said, no, no, we want some incentive so that we can adapt to energy saving technology. We need some incentive so that we can change the power sources from primary, from coal or petrol to solar. So there's a big difference in terms of the aspirations of the stakeholders within the industry. So while this analysis gives us a very good idea about the growth potential, if it is implemented, I think one more issue that I'm raising for the audience is that you also need to think about what are the incentive packages required and how to reconcile between the between the filling of the government employees, particularly ministries and bureaucrats. They want projects in their own hand, and they want to say this is our success, whereas the private sector has a completely other way around. They're thinking incentives. And on the top of it, there is always, and this is always true in Bangladesh and many other cases, there is always a club group between the bureaucrats and the investors. And the club group is ready for bringing the technology from outside, and you're not sure whether the technology is at all coming. Because if we spend money for wind energy, and if the wind is not produced, in other words, energy is not produced, what is happening? Is it at all any technology coming? So I have seen, in my experience, some of these big projects are also money laundering projects. And this has happened in Bangladesh. So I'm giving you the idea that these are the three things. And I think designing policies requires more thinking, but the results are very good, gives us the potential for moving towards that. And I think that is something that we learn from here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think I thank Dr. Enamul Haq for chairing this session, and I think we had an excellent discussion. So thank you all. So we'll break now, and we'll come back at 3:45, I think, if I'm not wrong. 3:45? Yes, 3:45 for the next session. Thank you.